All right, we're back to another week of Startup University here, right from Cape Town. The team has gotten together again today to, once a week talk about knowledge that we think is really important for building a successful company. It's basically we look at everything that I learned in my past, building my last startup, and the things that Björn learned, our co-founder at Acta, who sold his company for 400 million, and we try to bring that knowledge step by step into the brains of everyone that works at Acta, but also we want to do it publicly. This is why we're live streaming this. So if you're watching from YouTube somewhere in the world, thank you for joining this week, and we're excited to go another round of important startup university content for all of us. Before we get started, how's the team feeling? How's Monday morning energy? Good.
Very good, very good. We're excited.
The team is excited, perfect. Okay. The topic for today is common mistakes. So I wrote a list of the common mistakes that founders tend to make, especially first-time founders. Most of them are actually also based on what you find in Y Combinator, people talk a lot about. And again, the things we talk about are really made for tech startups. So these insights we're going to discuss might not be true for a retail company in a consumer space, but they're really situational to what it is to build a tech company with a product and so forth. So just to arrange it there a bit more. Let's start with the first one. It's called competition is bad. The most common mistake I think people make is thinking that competition is a bad thing when you're building your product, your tech product in the market. The reason they associate it is because I think there's a lot of people also talking about, hey, competition drives down the price, it's a bad thing, you shouldn't do that, and so forth. And the reason this is, I think, a bad take to follow to say, hey, there shouldn't be the competition. You know, I had many moments I pitched an idea to an investor or to another person, and the first thing is, oh, I already know this company that does that as well, in a similar way, right? This is actually a good thing, because the biggest risk you're facing, I think, as a startup is no longer technology risk, that you cannot build a thing. You can really build so many things today, but you're facing market risk, which is the risk that what you're building is something that no one actually wants. And a lot of time, if you start with the vision first, and then, don't have competition and you build for 1 or 2 years from this vision, then launch it to the world and see, hey, no one really wanted it in the first place. This is a really costly mistake to make, because you not only wasted 2 years of your life maybe building that thing, but also countless of dollars you invested probably in that journey that also can be emotionally taxing. So when I think about competition, I'll share with you the story that we went through at Jamie. When we built Jamie, which today is an AI meeting note taker, so it joins your meeting, it summarizes your call in super good quality. We started this, I think, around 3.5 years ago by now. And back then, there were already plenty of AI note takers out there. There were companies like Otter AI, which was the most popular, I would say, at this time. And they were already serving people with this AI use case. When we tried Otter, for example, and other products in the market, what we saw is that the experience was pretty shit. What that meant, the notes were really bad, especially in German, because we were German speaking. So, for non-English languages, the quality was super bad. Secondly, Otter required you to have a bot join the call, which we thought was really intrusive for the user experience. And the summary that you got out of it was really thin. It wasn't really good, so it was really superficial. And if I would take those notes and give it to you, for example, and say, hey, do you know what was going on in the meeting? You wouldn't really be able to do so. So we basically saw there's existing competition in the market, but we had a few unique insights on what we wanted to do differently at Jamie. The first one was that we wanted to really focus on non-English languages and make the use case really good for this market, because there's a lot of people like ourselves, which are non-English speaking people who have meetings in different languages. Second idea was to build a no-bot approach. So you could use Jamie without a bot joining your call. This means you could also use it in offline settings, not just in virtual calls, but also in virtual calls it just doesn't feel so intrusive, so weird to have this AI bot observing and recording everything you do. And the third thing we did, we spent a lot of time figuring out how we can do super high quality meeting notes. So we did a lot of engineering around different LLM calls we did and so forth. And these 3 things were distinct from what the competition was offering. And this allowed us to then get into the market, which was already validated. There was a need for AI meeting note takers, do a better solution and capture our market share. And even though Jamie is right now not the biggest AI meeting note taking company there, it's a company that's growing really well, has a great team together, is basically profitable if it wants to. So I think this really proved to me in my personal founder journey that competition is not bad, but actually it validates that the market risk might be much lower for you to build a meaningful company around. And I really think this is important to wrap our heads around. And what I'm not saying is that we should just copy what competition is doing and then do our version of it. You should have a unique insight into the problem, like something you want to do differently, where differentiation comes from. But at the same time, you're always competing against some existing solution. Even if you think, let's, I don't know, take an example of Dropbox, yeah, where you back then were able to upload files very easily. There was already an existing solution, which was maybe USB flash drives you could hand around. And of course, there were problems with that solution. You couldn't send them over the internet, right? You had them physically and so forth. But in a way, if you think about it, you're always competing against something that is already happening. And this might be your indirect, non-obvious competition. So this is why I would say competition is not bad. It's an important part of making something people actually want. What are your thoughts?
As the only non-technical person here, I think I love this. Every time we have this startup university, I always think like, okay, in content, it's the exact same thing. It's like, okay, you want to do a content piece, but someone else has already done it, or you draw inspiration from someone else. But then you do it in your way. You solve the things that you think, okay, that this is bad with this content, and make it better. And you're always competing against other people on the internet, especially with content. But this is not a bad thing at all. It's actually one of the best things you could have, because you see the idea. For example, at Cluely, we made one video. I think Chris is behind the camera. We saw one video at Cluely and we thought like, fuck, that's a good idea. But we could do it in our way. We could do it better way. So we didn't have to validate, okay, is this idea good? But we really had to think like, let's do it our way. And startup and content is like really close. I love this.
Any other thoughts from anyone?
I mean, to me personally, I think the reason why it's so counterintuitive is because the signal that you would typically get from, non-founders or like friends, family who you, chat about your idea with is typically like, oh, I heard of this before. There's this company doing it. And it's, and like those type of signals, I think make it truly hard to, think otherwise.
100%. There's always this negative connotation of competition. Oh, I already heard that. And they almost discredit your idea, which also I had to deal with many times. It's sort of a way of rejection. The thing I would just add, you need to win against the competition, right? This is also why we're here. The ambition is to beat the competition by solving the problem that a person has much more closely. And this is also why I think you should not study the features of your competitors and, oh, this is a cool thing we could also use, but rather study their unhappy customers. Figure out where the solution comes short, and then you can fit in there and I think do your version of it.
It's also a common trait in like good founders, and if you look at Steve Jobs or something, there's this idea in their head that like, okay, there is this thing, but I know that I can do it better, and this confidence allows them to shake up the market and bring out a better version. I think this is important for founders.
Perfect. Let's move on to the second mistake I see founders make, that probably also I made myself. It's called solution in search of a problem. We've talked about it, I think, many times before, because the essence of product market fit and making a startup that works is starting with a problem for a specific set of customers and not with a solution. A person doesn't care about your vision or your solution or the fancy thing you could build, but they care about getting their problem solved. And the mistake people tend to make is building a solution in search of a problem, starting with the solution first. At Jamie, before, we were doing a different thing. We were building B2B feedback software for German SMEs, helping them measure how the employees are doing in the company, happy, not so happy, through like surveys we send out automatically and so forth. And we sort of started with a solution because we thought, hey, this must be, this digital thing that people, should just answer via email, because back then there was not really like solutions implemented. They said offline solutions and so forth. But we were so fancy and spent 6 months probably refining the solution again and again. And we avoided this hard confrontation with the market. Is it something people actually wanted? And I think it's really, really risky. So maybe putting it very shortly into a distinct statement is you need to start with a problem and not the solution, right? Build from a problem that people have, not with a solution in your mind. I think a lot of people, also we saw maybe in the Web3 space or even now in the AI space, a lot of companies or startups are building things just because they can, because the solution sounds impressive and sounds cool. But over the test of time, I think you will truly see where there was a genuine problem that has been solved versus just something that sounded cool in our technology-loving brains. I think this is especially hard for engineering type of people. Also myself, I am someone who loves to, be close to technology and build from there. But it's very dangerous if you think about building a company that in the end works. Any questions? Akshat, you want to share something? Or not yet? Yeah?
So like if you have a company which is already in the competition or in the market, how do you overtake them or make your space? Because they are also looking out for other products, and they are also listening to their customers. They already have customers, so maybe in the case of Jamie, maybe you guys did something better, like you made, instead of a bot, made it seamless. But like the other company can do it also, and they already have all the customers. So like how would you grow in that?
Actually, a great question. So one thing I think people underestimate is how slow a company starts to move once you have 50 people and have an existing customer base of thousands of users and so forth. Because in the end, it's still a decision, right? In the company, maybe you have bet on that bot approach the entire time, and all of a sudden you really stick to it, and the decision maker there doesn't even dare to think in the other direction because you're so biased and maybe what you did, that it becomes very hard for them to actually extremely change the product, at least to a radical degree, like radically change the product. The other thing I would also say is, at the example of Jamie, we had to run really expensive models to solve the audio problem, and this was just also a unit economics question. If you have a million, let's say 100,000 customers or users every week, and all of a sudden you make a technology decision which increases the cost for you to run the summary by 50%, this is an insane thing to do, right? Because you might have investors who, say like, hey, this is our profit margin now, we need to earn this amount of money and so forth. These moves, I think, are really hard to make once you reach a certain level of scale. For us, it was easy. We just said, hey, we think people are happy to pay a bit more for the solution if they don't have a bot. And in hindsight, this was right, at least for a small subset. So these are, I think, two things I would, like, people tend to underestimate when you think about competition. I would comment on the other thing also. This was sort of the first question you actually asked: how do I win against competition, right? Well, there's not this one path, but one thing I'm very certain of is that speed matters. If you can just outrun your competition, this is obviously important. The other thing is just also the quality of things you make, decisions you make, approaches you take. And the devil is really in the detail. There could be two equal companies who are building in the exact same space, the exact same solution, and have the exact same mental model of what to build and how to do it. The one who will just execute more aggressively and faster is the one who will most likely win, because this is just the input factor to grabbing the market share. A third thought I would offer in regards to that question is, let's say you have two competitors which are relevant in the market you're building for. You can always define your market differently. Instead of going off this one customer segment, you could narrow down on a smaller one, but solve a problem even better for this segment. And then all of a sudden you can still build a company that is doing like 10 million plus in ARR every year and grow from there. And then also this goes in line with what we discussed the past weeks. Start with a very narrow segment, because at a global scale it's already big enough, and penetrate that segment first. Then think about translating this. Yeah, and at the same time, the last thing I would say is, this is so different depending on what stage you are in the life cycle of a company, right? The things we talk about, if you're doing less than $1 million revenue, are just so different. Like the problem going from 0 to 1 million are so different than going from 1 million to 10 million, and even from 10 to 100, right? So the dynamics really change how you think about markets and so forth. So we always need to be careful with what we teach, what we want to share with us internally, the way we think about stuff, because it's really tied to the stage you're in as a company. This is the extensive answer to your really good question. Okay. Any other thoughts on that, or should we move on? Cool. Then let me pick the most important lessons for today, because I don't want to make it so long again. We try to stick to around 30 minutes. The next mistake I think a lot of people make is doing fake work. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of activities that look exciting, promising, useful on the outside, like going to a conference if you're the founder, right? Or pitching to investors all day long because you think fundraising is the only factor that is missing, or being constantly busy in meetings, talking about strategy, like these sort of things. And the reason why I would classify them as fake work is because in the stage where you haven't found product market fit yet, where you're below 1 million or 10 million in revenue, the only thing you should be doing is talking to people, building product. And I think we're repeating this mantra almost every week, because this is really what it's about. There's no blueprint. Also, as you talk to users, I think there's these non-obvious things that you figure out. And you only figure that out by doing it, not by thinking about it and over-intellectualizing, I think, that pursuit. What I caught from a few YC videos I was also watching from Michael Siebel, one of them, that oftentimes in those office hours they also just tell the founders, well, just do X, it's just do that thing. Most often I think the thing you should be doing is quite obvious in the moment you're in, right? But then we tend to overthink because fear kicks in and because overthinking kicks in and because my mom asked me that there's competition. Luis, are you sure that's the right thing? These imperfections really happen, but in the end, it's quite simple. And I think you need to be really protective of your time and make sure that you spend, I think, more than 80 or 90% of your time on the things that actually get you closer to a product market fit. Is there maybe an insight from you, Elias, as you think about Nova and also the past?
I mean, currently we're kind of in a stage where, retention and all was nice, but also now I really don't know what else I should be working on, and now it's kind of like this stage of, okay, I could be making these little designs, I could maybe like add these small UI UX changes to the product, but the really obvious thing when I don't know what to do is just talking to customers, I think, in this case. I think also in the beginning when I started out working on products and when I didn't really have the skills to like just work on product, I also spent a lot of time doing fake work, like doing pitch decks and like these sorts of things. That was back when I was a first-time founder, yeah.
I have one question, because we're obviously talking about what you shouldn't do, but if I get to the core of what you shouldn't do, it always comes down to like speed in iterating, speed in the things you do and not focusing on other things that take away the speed. How can you assure that you keep up with those speed? Because of course the speed changes on which, regarding in which state you are as a startup, but is there a way for a founder to like always be on that speed? I don't know if you can say it like this, or do you have something from your experience?
So the first thing that comes to mind is that speed in the wrong direction doesn't matter. You can run super, super fast, but if it's the wrong direction, you might go actually the opposite way of where your goalpost is that you want to reach. So I think the first thing you need to get right is direction. But now comes the paradox. I think the only way you get direction right is by running first. You need to first run somewhere, because then it gives you data point from the world, from the market, from how people are using the thing, so you can course adjust. So regardless of it, you need to run. You need to make the first steps, do real action. Also speed, I mean, it's really hard to, I think, objectively assess, right? Yes, I could look now at how quickly Akshat can code a feature versus some other engineer, right? But to me, it feels a bit too complex to really unpack it now, factor by factor, and this is what speed is. I would say in the end, give it your all, everyone has different capacity, and also there's so many things you can build. It's not that you need to be the fastest engineer ever to build a startup. There's probably can be above average in just the pure speed and still build a valuable company. However, depending on what market you go into, you need to look at it as a frame also from your competition. Because let's say if we were to go into large language model, foundational model building, this would be a really hard game for us to win, because there's just teams who are really locked in San Francisco, like 7 days a week, I think, like 16 hours a day, and they're just so much more aggressive. I think we would not have the capacity to do it at the same level as they do at the moment. So I think the speed question is really relative to the market you're going after, or to the competition that you have in a given market. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some thoughts on top of that. Cool. Let's move on to another mistake, and this one is a bit I want to argue for it very strongly. At the same time, it could be that someone out there, or you guys, don't resonate with it, so let's have the conversation. So the thing that I think people sometimes do wrong is not building for themselves. And what I mean by that is, if you're building for yourself truly, you always have product market fit of whatever that segment is, from what need you're building towards from yourself. I think there's a lot of, let's say, McKinsey type of consultants out there who say one day, oh, I read this market report and I make this analysis and I see this thing is growing fast. Yeah, let's now go raise some money. We build a company and we'll be really successful. And they execute from this consultant type of brain. Not building for themselves, because they just study it basically from secondary data or from talking to people, but they didn't really have the personal connection to it. There's some examples where this worked reasonably well to some degree, but I think there's also countless of examples where this did not work. the reason why I think building for yourself is so important is because in the end, I think a startup, okay, this is now a more general life point, so I don't know if it resonates, but the point is not just to build a startup for 10 years, make shit ton of money, but be miserable for 10 years doing it. But the point also here with time, which to me is the most scarce resource we all possess, is to live a great life, fulfilled life, doing work that you care about, doing work with people you care about, you enjoy being around with. Also doing work for people you care about in a sense, right? I have a lot more excitement building for my friends right now. For example, Nova, or Reflector, the product, it's an AI coaching product. I'm building it for a lot of my friends in Berlin that I know sort of face those things every day. And I genuinely enjoy talking to them, learning how could we make this better, like, oh, tell me more about that. I have some curiosity for that. And I think it gives you quite an unfair advantage if you deeply, deeply care, if you have sort of this founder market fit combined with the criteria that you're building for yourself. So me personally, I try to, also at Acta, we try to really honor this. Maybe we can take your example a bit. You want to share how that felt like or not?
Yeah, sure. I think especially this term like founder market fit is so nice, and it's so overlooked compared to a product market fit, because we always talk about product market fit, right? But like the fact that you need to be motivated to do the hard things and have the customer conversations, like that only comes from a place where you genuinely enjoy what you're building, and that's why I think it's so super important.
And I would say, of course, it might not be always feasible to build entirely for yourself. So we could maybe generalize it by caring deeply about the thing you build. You know, there needs to be some personal touch, like a thing in your soul maybe that speaks to the thing you're building. That's how I would maybe simplify it a bit.
A great example for this are Chris and me. Shout out to Chris. When we joined Acta, it's like we had our experience in content, but it was like, okay, we're the startup now, what should we do? But we got to 10K followers in 7 weeks just by doing content that we love. And it was like the thing that we wanted to do. And I think Ruben has a saying about that. I don't know the exact saying, but audience comes last. Like first there's the inspiration, then it's you, and then there's the audience. And I think for us on media side, it was exactly this. It was like founder market fit. We wanted to make this content, we wanted to do it, and then it resonated us. And we were able to operate in such high speed, at such high quality, just because we cared about it and we loved doing it. And then we found out, okay, what do the people like? And then we adjusted. But it's like this deep connection to the thing we do was there. And I think this was the big, turning point why it worked. So, great saying.
And maybe tying this back to competition, also Akshat, you asked earlier about, I think the team that wins is also the one that just cares the most, because how are you going to win against someone that just genuinely loves serving that customer segment or building out that thing, right? That is just so passionate about every little detail of it, obsessed over every little detail in the product, you know? Someone that almost has physical pain if some detail is off in the product, because, I mean, we relate to that. I think we had this feeling where we had an old version from Reflector out and we were like, man, every person that signs up, it really hurts us almost physically, because we know we can do such a better thing, right? And it's automatically, I think, a great driver for motivation. I think from the competitive perspective, doing the thing you really, really care about also puts you at an advantage in comparison to someone who doesn't really care so much about it. Cool. Let's do one or two more lessons. Next one is, or like mistake, next mistake is measuring the wrong thing. If you build a startup or read anything about management or business, what you quickly hear is, yeah, we need to be data driven. We need to measure everything. And oftentimes founders, also first-time founders, very quickly start to create a dashboard of 55 different metrics, from every little number from their web traffic to in the product to whatever it may be. The problem when you measure 55 different things and try to look at all of them is that you very quickly get confused by the thing that actually matters. The only thing that matters for most startups is revenue. And this is your primary North Star metric. For us, we are looking at revenue for all of the ventures we do, and it hurts a lot to see that revenue is still at 0 or 100 MRR, 100 euros at the early stages, right? But it keeps you very truthful to the real progress you're making. And the mistake, or like the counter example of that, is measuring vanity metrics. It would be really stupid for us to now start measuring the time someone mentions Acta on Twitter. You know, yeah, it's an interesting, cool metric, and it gives a proxy for, you know, how much people are involved with what we do, how much they, you know, talk about what we do. But ultimately, does this directly tie into the value creation we're doing with the companies? Likely not. So an important thing is to really measure the right thing, which is almost always, for the vast majority of businesses we also build, revenue. And yeah, don't cheat yourself into measuring the wrong thing. The small question you can always apply when you're asking, okay, what should we measure, is if you look at this one metric, would it be immediately obvious whether your company is doing well or not doing well? And even, you know, let's look at YouTube views we do, or like social media views. They're a metric which is super amazing for you as a team to look at, and they represent very truthfully whether you're making progress or not, right? But on the Acta level, this is nice, but in the end, it's all in service of revenue, because this expresses how much value we create, right? So I would always say, don't measure things you should not be measuring. Keep yourself very honest with the one metric that matters, and be confronted with that metric every single week, every single day, and think about how you can solve that. Yeah.
Our metrics live on the website. Maybe we can plug this.
Yeah, okay. On our website, all of our metrics are public. Actually, not so many. It's just 2 or 3. The thing I would add, the moment you have a team, right, is the moment where you ideally should have, for every person, one number that they're in charge, one KPI, one metric that really matters. This is, however, not so relevant in the, let's say, start if you're just 2 people or 3 people, because then the joint goal, the joint metric is revenue. And this also doesn't change, but still, if you think about a team and arranging a team, it feels so cool for you to have your own metric that you're in charge of, right? Because then it becomes truthful what progress you do and so forth. It would be not so nice if we just talk about content every week and yeah, this is cool, this is not, like, no, we look at the actual thing, right? And you're in charge of the actual thing. So yeah, that's also, I think, good for running teams. Let's do one more and then we wrap it up for this week. Okay, it's the one I get a bit not emotional, but I call it the mistake outsourcing product. As you know, I studied business in Maastricht. Great business school. I really enjoyed my time studying business. And after I went into the startup thing more and more and was building Jamie over the years, I think every month or so someone reached out like, hey Louis, I have this cool product idea. How do I build this? Right, like technically. And then I went on many calls, by now probably like 30 or 40 calls of this type of profile, like a business person, like how do I build this? And the common thinking those people have is, yeah, I want to hire an agency and pay them a bit of money and then the product is done and then I can sell it, right? I mean, this is how you would think about maybe a hoodie you make or like a phone case or something. The problem is tech companies or product companies don't work like this. Your product is not done after you've built it for the first time, but rather it's a living thing you are constantly shaping. And if you're entering a market where you want to play the technology, the product game, this is your core asset. It's not an afterthought, it's the essence of what you do. So when I talk them out of hiring an agency, the next thing they do is, okay, I'm just going to get an engineer then and pay them a bit of money. I'm like, do you give them equity? No, I don't need to. I mean, he just needs to build a product, right? So then we're at the next level. Then I say, again, the technology and the product and the speed at which you build product and the quality at which you build product is the most important input variable to your success in the market. You are not going to find someone great that is really outstanding at this if you're not giving them equity, because they could work at probably a startup that's much more interesting than the one that you're building for better comp and especially for equity. People, not everyone, but some people care about the long-term exposure of the things they build. It's much more empowering to work on something where you have equity, even if it's just, let's say, 5% or 3%, because in 10 years, if this really compounds, if the plan works, there's real economic upside, and then this is aligned as an incentive. So I tend to always talk them out of that. Yeah, and then eventually they land on, okay, now I'm gonna just have a founding engineer with equity, which is great, but at the same time I think you need like a CTO type person. There needs to be a real technical leadership role in your team if you want to succeed in a product technology environment. Even today in the AI world with the Lovables and so forth, I think this is still true. And let me explain to you why. I think you can today with Lovable very easily verify the demand for a small product you build, a web product you can put together with a few prompts in 1 or 2 weeks and give it to people and firstly see, okay, how's it going and so forth. However, at the state of technology today, you, I think, hit a ceiling in terms of quality quite quickly, where all of a sudden your code base grows very chaotic. It becomes really hard for you to make any sort of changes. And also, if I look at the products which are being created today with Lovable, they're typically quite low in quality. It's, you know, they functionally work. They might have some of the elements, but it's not a delightful experience that really solves something in a unique or a new way. So also for us, I mean, we're like at least 50% of people I would say at Acta know how to code and are engineers, more coming. I could not think about building a product-driven company without a proper engineering lead in each of the ventures. So this is, I think, another thought in addition to that. You two seemed like you wanted to say something. Who wants to go first? Yeah?
Yeah, like I would totally agree with that. Like maybe in t-shirts or something it works, but software is not like a white labeling problem where you take something and you just label it and then you sell it, because like it's so much into the business you are building. Even though you need business understanding, but without technical thing, you cannot build a tech company, I think, in my opinion. Yeah. And talking about a point like which you bring up while with AI and all of this, like a lot of people are thinking, hey, now we have AI, video editing is easy, programming is easy, so building a company is easy, which I don't think is the case, because before also you could hire a lot more people. Like if you had money, you could go and hire 100 engineers. That was not the problem in the first place. Sure, it's faster now, but it's putting things together, thinking of the business logic, having the idea, thinking, talking to people and recognizing that gap and, you know, making the pivots. I think that's also very important. So I don't think AI helps us in that sense. It maybe helps us in productivity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also a very deep problem in that problem. I don't know if I can say it, but I had these problems when I started. I think the way you think about what you want to build sometimes like completely wrecks up the process that you have to go through. When you sit down and you think, okay, I want to build this company and I could use those video editors and then do this for the content and these engineers, I need that, and then it would be a great company. It's so hard to even start with that, because like this process that you map out in your head will never come true, and this really gets you stuck in this planning phase when you start. And I think some what you say I can only refer to like a solopreneur. Maybe just start with the things that you can do and you can achieve, and then everything develops out of this. Maybe you get to the problem where like, okay, fuck, I don't know how to do this. Maybe I should hire someone, or maybe I should get someone. But like mapping out everything, trying to outsource everything, you won't get far from there. So yeah, for all the people that are just starting, just start with what you can.
Eli needs to go to a feedback call. That's why he's quitting the live stream now. Any closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, sure. I think it all comes down to sort of valuing like crafts, right? And it's like totally fine to to sort of figure out like, hey, this is like not something I'm good at, right? Like I don't really understand like media, like how you sort of produce proper media, but like being like able to say, okay, like I'm not at a point where I should sort of decide how these things are made. Like it's not a black box. You don't have like employees, you put money in and then you get output, right? It's not manufacturing. And sort of like valuing this like sort of craft, right, is like all that matters, right? And hope I mean it's like a bit tough to say, right? But I feel this sort of like very sort of MBA style sort of top down like sort of approach to companies is slowly dying, but sort of actually like leaning into that and finding like a good replacement is like all that matters. And I feel that's like basically what sort of makes or breaks companies in the long term.
Great. So I think this wraps this week's Startup University up quite nicely. Chris is trying to tell us 2 questions. Nice. Let us know.
If you could go back to the early days of our company, of your company, and give your former self one piece of advice about the strategic mistake to avoid in scaling operations, what would it be and why?
So the question was if I could go back in time and talk to my younger founder self and give him one strategic piece of knowledge or advice, what would it be in regards to kind of growing and building company? It's hard to really narrow it down to the one piece, if I'm very honest, because there's multiple to it. Probably the one that is most general, which is most powerful to me, is to, and it sounds very stupid, but figure things out by taking real action. And what I mean by that is, you don't fix your go-to-market motion by reading 15 market reports, talking to 5 different people, and then watching some YouTube videos. Yes, you might get ideas, right? But for your company, maybe something entirely different works, right? And you need to go out there, experiment, try a thing, and then learn from real data, like first principles in a way, what works for you. And I think this principle expands to everything. When I was 15 and I wanted to build my first little, app or software project, I didn't know it, right? And I didn't learn it by reading a market report, watching abstract CTOs talking about it. No, I went ahead, tried to, what is VS Code? Okay, figure out how I can open VS Code. I then was like, okay, what is a single page application? Then I landed on Vue.js, which I learned back then. Then I was watching all the tutorials, but I was always building, right? And I think the most important piece I would always say, and it's maybe not as sexy or as cool as it sounds, just go ahead, do the thing, and get good at figuring things out. Because if you figure out that you can figure everything out, you have everything figured out in a way. Okay, yeah. And second question from the stream, by the way. Thanks for the questions in chat.
About team building, when choosing a teammate, do you look at what he does or his speech and passion? So if there's nothing inside, but it shows a strong passion.
So the question is how we go about how you would go about picking your teammates. If we're going more for the skill or for the passion or for the craft. I'm a bit divided on that because the truth is character matter, but also skill matters, right? If you have someone with great character, that's a great foundation, and this is something I would never sacrifice on at the moment. I would never go back and hire someone who's super good at what they do, but they're just not a nice person to be around, not a well-reflected person, not a self-aware person. I wouldn't do that because just working together would drain me and just wouldn't be as seamless and feeling nice as it does right now, for example, here at Acta. So I would never compromise on character in the hiring equation. At the same time, it would also not be true to say that skill doesn't matter. It could be the greatest person with the nicest attitude to work hard and to learn, but if just the skill gap is so large from what the company needs today, for example, and what this person has to offer, we cannot make the decision to have him on our roster right now in what we do. So I always look at both. This is the honest answer. There's not one that I think prevails the other. What I would say to someone who might want to join a team at some point, maybe they're out there like 15, 16 years old thinking about the startup thing, build things, build side projects. The way I hire people is by always asking them directly, hey, what have you built in the past? Can you show it to me? And reviewing that work. And the hard thing is, I think I can tell within 60 seconds whether this is someone who is on a skill level that we're looking for or not, just from the initial taste in the landing page they're building or in the past projects and so forth. And how do you get better at a skill? Well, by doing a lot of things, by trying a lot of things, building them. In the process of building something, you figure out what you should have been building. And this is, I think, always important to keep in mind as you want to get into a position where you can get hired. Another question, Chris, or was it last question? Yeah.
What drives you, just in one sentence?
What drives me in one sentence? Bringing useful ideas to life. That's for me. For the others, let's go. We do one quick round of what drives you.
I guess I'd sort of narrow down to sort of apply trial and error basically in your whole life, but like especially in sort of building products. Like it's just like maximizing the amount of sort of cycles you get yourself through, because that's the only way you sort of get feedback for yourself.
What drives you, Joe? The car, right?
The car. Yeah, normally, yeah. What upstream, by the way, I didn't say anything. I'm really tired today. But what drives me is what I would say is following my heart and really knowing, okay, what I want in life and what I don't want, and then trying to get a way to do that. For example, in a more concrete example, I wouldn't have seen myself in a corporate, in like a consultancy or in a bank or something. I want to be like really on the actual product and really have an impact. So that's what I think I found here. and now I just need to find my way into the actual tasks I can solve. But yeah.
I think that's a very hard question to say in one sentence, but I think the inner screaming for moving forward. I think there's nothing worse than this emptiness of not doing things and not doing things that fulfill you. And I think this inner screaming of moving forward is something that gets me up every day.
I would say just solving hard, important problems. That's it.
All right, with this unconventional ending, which I really loved, thank you guys for watching, tuning in for another week of Startup University. Chris, wait before you stop it because there's always this delay. Perfect, he knows it. We're back again next week for another version of this, Startup University. Also on Friday we have coming up our weekly demo session. We talk about, or actually we show what we're doing every single week across the ventures. I think super cool to see. And Joe just reminded me, we're looking for 2 new team members. One person that is great at product and design and who would love to build together with us, and another person which is great at engineering, ideally with 2 or 3 years of experience for both roles, and strong expertise in mobile, so Expo, React Native, this sort of stuff. One more closing word from Justus, and then see you next week again.
One very important word. We see that more and more people are watching the Startup University videos. Subscribe if you don't want to miss out on the next things. We love to see that our subscriber count is growing and the active family is getting bigger. So leave some love and yeah, have a great day. Yes. Oh, let's go back to work. Oh.